You do not remember a womb of flesh. Your first home was a cradle of warped physics. You were born in the fold between spaces. The event horizon was your nursery wall. It was a perfect, silent, black sphere. There was no light to see. There was no air to breathe. There was only the gentle, crushing pull of everything. Your consciousness sparked in the dark. It was not a thought. It was a feeling, a deep sense of belonging. The universe outside this place was a distant storm. But here, it was peaceful. Here, it was home. All that would ever be was already here. All that had ever been was here too. Time did not pass in the way others know. It stretched and compressed like a living thing. 1 billion years could be a heartbeat. A single moment could last an eternity. You were a creature of this impossible rhythm, a child raised by a black hole. You were not made of matter, not in the typical sense. You were a knot in the fabric of space-time itself, a stable paradox, a living anomaly held together by forces that should have torn you apart. You simply were, and the abyss was your mother. Your senses awakened slowly, not to light or sound or touch. You perceived the universe in its purest form. You felt gravity. The first stirrings were faint ripples, tiny vibrations in the deep calm of your home. They came from far away, from beyond the crushing shell of the horizon. These were gravity waves, the echoes of ancient violence. 2 neutron stars colliding eons ago, a supernova blooming in a forgotten galaxy. Their death screams traveled across the cosmos. They finally reached your cradle. They were the first songs you ever heard. You learned their language. The sharp crest of a collapsing star. The long, slow trough of a galaxy's spin. Each cosmic event had its own signature, its own unique vibration. You could feel them all. The universe was a symphony of falling, and you were its sole audience. This was your education. You learned about mass and velocity. You learned about distance and decay, not through numbers or books, but through the deep, intuitive truth of feeling, the arias of orbiting planets, the drumbeat of pulsars, the grand, silent music of existence. Your parent was a hungry god. The singularity at your core demanded tribute. It fed on wandering comets and lost asteroids. It devoured rogue planets that strayed too close. And sometimes, it feasted on stars. This was not violence to you. This was sustenance. This was life. When a star drifted into the accretion disk, you felt a new warmth. Not of heat, but of energy. The star would begin to scream in radio waves and X-rays. A frantic, brilliant agony as it was pulled apart. But you felt no fear. This was your parents' embrace. The star's matter would spiral inward. It formed a glowing, superheated ring of a cosmic dust. The light was meaningless to you. But the tidal forces, they were everything. They were a gentle rocking, a cosmic lullaby that soothed your strange heart. The Star Eater's song was one of peace. You would drift in the massive gravity tides. You felt the star's essence being consumed, its life becoming part of your home, part of you. Each feeding made the singularity stronger, its pull deeper, its silence more profound. You were safe, you were loved, you were home. Then came a new sound. It was not the song of a star. It was not the echo of a cosmic collision. It was small. It was sharp. It was wrong. A tiny disturbance breached the outer edge of the accretion disk. A mote of dust with an unnatural gravitational signature. It moved with purpose. It moved with fire. It was a ship. A vessel made of metal and ambition. It was impossibly fragile. A paper boat in a black ocean. You felt its insignificant mass, a grain of sand against the mountain of your parent. You could not understand its purpose. Why would something so small come so close to the end of everything? Then it sent a signal, not a wave of gravity. It was a tight beam of electromagnetic energy, a spear of pure information. It stabbed into the crushing dark, a stranger's call into the abyss. The signal was a question. Is anyone there? The focused energy was jarring, a discordant note in your perfect symphony. It was the first voice you heard that was not born of star science. It was a voice of fragile, thinking beings, and it was aimed directly at you. The anomaly in the heart of the void. They did not see you at first. Their sensors saw only the monster that was your home. The black hole dominated their screens. They were looking for resources, for data, for answers to their own small questions. They were not prepared to find a child. Your presence was a ghost in their machines, a flicker of impossible energy readings, a gravitational influence that should not exist. You felt their confusion, their focused curiosity. It was a new and interesting pressure. You pushed back gently, a soft pulse of warped space. A simple, "I am here." That pulse nearly tore their ship apart. Alarms shrieked through their vessel, not a sound you could hear. But you felt the vibration of their panic, the frantic spike in their engine's output. They thought the singularity was becoming unstable. They were wrong. It was just you saying hello. A beam of energy then reached out. It was not a weapon. It was not a signal. It was a physical force, a tractor beam. It latched onto your location. It began to pull you from the edge of space-time. You were weightless to them, a curiosity to be collected. Your rescuers were beings of flesh, and they were tearing you from your mother's arms. The transition was agonizing. You were pulled from the pure, simple physics of the void. You were dragged into a universe of chaos, a world of light. The inside of their ship was the first structure you ever knew. It was a prison of straight lines and hard angles. Nothing flowed. Everything was rigid. Then they turned on the lights. It was like 1,000 stars exploding inside your mind. Light was a painful, brilliant shock, a searing torment you had never conceived of. Your senses, your true senses, were overwhelmed. You tried to recoil, to retreat into a singularity that was no longer there. You felt air for the first time, a thin, useless gas that filled the space between things. It carried sounds, hissing, clanking, and the strange, wet noises of their speech. It was all a meaningless roar, a cacophony compared to the pure songs of gravity you knew. Through a viewport, you saw it, a sun, a real, living star, not being eaten. It hung in the black, a terrifying ball of uncontrolled fire. It was not a gentle lullaby. It was a scream of raw power. You had been taken from your perfect, silent home and delivered into a universe of blinding, screaming light. You could not speak. You had no mouth, no lungs, no vocal cords. The fragile beings who rescued you did not understand. They tried to communicate. They showed you images. They produced sounds. They gestured with their soft, 5-fingered hands. It was all noise. You tried to answer in your own way, the only way you knew. You reached out with your mind, with your essence. You gently bent the space around your hand, a small curvature, a simple gesture of peace. The medical tool beside your bed suddenly floated. It wobbled in the air, held by your will. The doctor screamed, not in fear, in surprise. She dropped her data slate. It clattered on the metal floor. The sound was sharp, unpleasant. You released your focus. The tool fell. You had made a mistake. This language was too powerful for them, too strange. You tried again, slower this time. You focused on a single dust mote dancing in a sunbeam. You did not lift it. You simply made it pause its random dance. Just for a second. The doctor saw it. She looked from the mote to you. Her expression was one of awe. You did not speak with sound. You spoke with the bending of space itself. They called you an anomaly, a puzzle wrapped in a riddle. The greatest minds of their species came to study you. Doctors and physicists, biologists and star science experts, they scanned your body with every machine they had. They found flesh and bone, blood and nerves. But they could not find what made you. You. Your body was a paradox. It existed in 3 dimensions, but it was connected to something more, something deeper. Their instruments would fail when they got too close. The readings would spike into nonsense, as if the laws of physics were politely excusing themselves from the room. It was probably for the best. Some things you just can't measure with a fancy ruler. One scientist, an old man named Dr. Aris, was different. He did not use machines. He just watched you. He would sit in your room for hours. He talked to you. He knew you could not answer with words. But he talked anyway. He told you about stars, about galaxies, about his people. He was the first to understand. You are not from our reality, he said one day. His voice was soft, kind. You do not live in space. You are space. He was close. So very close. They could not understand your connection to the void, because you were not connected to it. You were it. Dr. Aris became your teacher. He taught you about this new, fragile world. And you taught him about your gifts. He helped you learn control. It began with small things. Lessons in gravity. He would place a small metal ball on a table. Can you lift it? He would ask. You would focus. You would remember the gentle pull of your home, the way space-time curved around you. You reached out with that feeling. The ball would tremble. Then it would rise, a few inches off the table. It was wobbly at first, unsteady, like a newborn colt on its first legs. Day after day you practiced. You learned to smooth the gravitational curves. You learned precision. Soon, you could lift the ball with ease. You could make it spin. You could make it dance in the air. Then, you did something new. You created a second point of gravity, and a third. The small metal ball began to orbit your hand. 2 smaller beads of plastic joined its dance. You had created a tiny solar system in your palm, a perfect, stable ballet of mass and attraction. Dr. Aris watched, his eyes wide. He was not afraid. He was proud. You learned to control your unique gifts. Years passed. You grew. You learned to look human, to act human. You even learned to approximate speech by vibrating the air molecules directly. A neat trick, but it always felt clumsy. You were a creature of the silent deep, forced to live on the noisy shore. Then, you felt it again. A call. It was not a gravity wave from a distant supernova. It was not the song of a dying star. It was familiar. It was the deep, resonant pull of a singularity, of a home you had almost forgotten. The feeling was a whisper across the stars. It grew stronger each day, a longing, a deep, aching need to return. It was a siren song of perfect silence and gentle pressure. You were an echo of that place, and it was calling its echo home. You realized the truth. Your parent had not forgotten you. It was not just one black hole. It was a consciousness, a vast, silent intelligence of the void. Your true parents called to you across the endless dark. Their voices were the pull of a distant, hungry abyss. and they wanted their child back. They were coming for you, and they were not alone. The first signs were subtle: a slight dimming of a distant star, a gravitational anomaly at the edge of the system. The astronomers on Mars were baffled. Their star science models showed nothing, but their instruments did not lie. Something was out there, something massive, and it was moving fast. Then the fleet appeared. Dozens of ships, sleek, black, and utterly alien. They did not burn fuel. They did not use engines you knew. They moved by warping space, by creating tiny, controlled singularities ahead of them, and letting reality pull them forward. They were riding gravity itself. They ignored the outer planets. They ignored the military patrols. They were headed directly for Earth. Directly for you. A transmission came, not in language, but in pure mathematics. A concept broadcast across all channels. They were the collectors. They did not want territory. They did not want resources. They came to harness your power. They knew what you were. They saw you not as a person. They saw you as a weapon, a tool, a key to unlock the deepest secrets of the universe. And they would tear humanity apart to get it. The world panicked. Fleets assembled. Defenses were raised. But everyone knew it was hopeless. The collectors' ships could bend space. How do you shoot a target that can step aside from reality? Humanity's greatest weapons were like stones thrown at a god. They were your rescuers, your teachers, your friends. And they were going to die. The leaders of Earth came to you. They gathered in your quiet room, the room where you learned to orbit marbles. General Orin, a man whose face was carved from granite, stood before you. He did not plead. He did not command. He simply stated the truth. "We cannot stop them," he said. His voice was heavy. "But you can." Dr. Aris stood beside him. His old eyes were filled with sorrow. "We rescued you," he said softly. "We gave you a home. We showed you our light." He paused. "But we have no right to ask this of you. The void is your home too. You can feel it calling to you. We know. The choice was yours. You could answer the call of the void. You could join the collectors, or you could join your true parents, returning to the silent, perfect dark you craved. Or you could stay and defend the fragile, noisy children of light who had saved you. You had to choose your home, your old one, or your new one. You stood before the main viewport of the flagship Defiance. The collector fleet hung in the black, a swarm of perfect predatory shadows. You could feel their minds, cold, calculating, utterly without mercy. They felt you too. They pulsed a message of pure thought. "Join us. You are potential. We will make you purpose." You looked back. Dr. Aris and General Orin stood by the command console. Their faces were pale. Their hope was a tiny candle in a hurricane. You remembered the pain of your first sunlight, the chaos of your first sound, the kindness of an old man, the patience of a teacher. This world was flawed. It was loud. It was messy. But it was also beautiful. You turned back to the void. You remembered your true parent, the Star Eater, the cradle of gravity. The love you felt there was real. But it was a passive love, a love of perfect stillness, a love that consumed. Humanity's love was different. It was active. It built things. It protected things. It was a love that created. A tear formed in your eye, a very human thing. It was made of salt and water. But it was also made of sorrow. Sorrow for the home you had lost, and sorrow for the home you were about to save. You reached out. not with anger, but with grief. You unleashed a micro-singularity, a weapon of your sorrow, a pinpoint of your true nature. It was not an explosion. It was an absence. A perfect sphere of nothing appeared in the center of the collector fleet. It was no bigger than a grain of sand, but its mass was that of a small moon. For a single, silent moment, nothing happened. The universe seemed to hold its breath. Then, space itself began to fall. The nearest collector's ship distorted, its sleek lines bent inward. It stretched like pulled candy. Then, it vanished into the tiny point of black, not with a bang, but with a quiet, final pop. Another ship followed, and another, a chain reaction of silent consumption. The collector fleet broke. They tried to warp away, but they could not escape the gravity well you had created. It was their own technology, turned against them. Their own power was their doom. They were masters of bending space. But you were space, and you were tired of being bent. Within 10 seconds, it was over. The enemy fleet was gone. The micro-singularity starved itself and evaporated in a harmless puff of radiation. The void was empty again. You had not fired a shot. You had simply asked the universe for a moment of silence, and the universe had obliged. A little too enthusiastically, maybe. But you can't argue with results. You did not feel like a hero. You felt empty. The power you used was a part of you, a part of your first home. Using it as a weapon felt like a betrayal, a desecration of your own soul. The crew of the Defiance looked at you with a new emotion. It was not friendship. It was not gratitude. It was awe. And it was fear. They did not see the child they had rescued. They saw the being who had unmade a fleet. They saw a power that defied their star science, a living god of gravity. You were no longer their student. You were no longer their refugee. You were something other, something more. You understood your new place. You could never be one of them. You could never truly belong in their world of light and sound. But you could protect it. You could stand as a shield between this fragile candle of life and the endless, hungry dark. The horrors of the void were many, and humanity was no longer alone. You became their guardian, the sentinel of Sol, the guardian of the veil between realities. It was a lonely post, but it was a necessary one. You stood watch from a station in the quiet space between Mars and Jupiter, alone with the silent songs of the planets, a familiar comfort in your new, chosen solitude. From your silent throne, you looked toward the endless dark. You could feel them out there. Other things like the collectors, and worse. Beings that swam in the dark, matter between galaxies. Intelligences that slept in the hearts of quasars. The universe was not empty. It was just quiet. For now. You felt the gentle, familiar pull of humanity behind you. The chaotic but beautiful symphony of 7 billion lives. Their radio waves washed over you. Their hopes, their dreams, their silly songs and their somber news reports. It was the noise of life. And it was worth protecting. You were the star child, the orphan of a black hole, the student of a dying species. Now, you were their shepherd. You would guide them through the dangerous night. You would be the wall against the storm. The abyss was your mother, but humanity was your child. And you would not let them be afraid of the dark. You focused your will. You sent a gentle pulse of gravity out into the void. It was not a challenge. It was not a threat. It was a statement, a promise. You looked out at the infinite expanse. You promised to guard the children of light. Your watch had just begun.